Hi, everybody. Andrew Champagne here alongside the Jim Cantori of Arizona Horse Racing, JD Fox, for this week's edition of Champagne and JD. We'll get to the Arizona stuff in a little bit, but we're going to give JD a little bit of a break from that. It's been a long day for our friends in Arizona, so you know what we're going to do? We're going to bring in a friend of the show, a friend of ours, and another track announcer in our track announcer series. From Indiana Grand, please welcome Bill Downs. Bill, welcome to the show.
Thanks so much, Andrew. Hi, JD. How are you?
Oh, as good as you can be after a 5-hour commission meeting today.
Yeah,
we're hanging in there.
Those are never fun, and from what I hear, there's some news coming out of that. But commission meetings are always very tedious.
Yeah, and we'll get to the diving in and the nitty gritty for that in just a moment. I called him the Jim Cantori of Arizona Horse Racing because whenever there's a disaster, the Weather Channel sends Jim Cantori out to cover it. Arizona Horse Racing, not saying it's a disaster, but you can see it from there.
When I'm speaking twice at a racing commission meeting, you know it's wrong.
Yeah, and you also know something important is going on when I eschew my typical introduction of our guest by saying he doesn't need an introduction, but I'm going to give him one anyway. That's how you know this is serious business we're talking about. However, on a serious note, we're excited to have Bill on the show. This is going to be a wide-ranging conversation that all of us are really looking forward to. If you haven't seen our past shows with track announcers, go to our YouTube page. You can queue those up. We had Pete Aiello on last week, and we covered everything from his start in the business, which included a stint with Bill Downs early in his career, to Often Pacing and Joe Neville's neighborhood cat that may or may not be little or old, or maybe even his cat, not his cat. We don't know. We're not here to judge. However, we are here to talk to Bill. Bill's got a bunch of great stories to tell, and we're excited to give him the floor and just roll tape and give him as much airtime as we possibly can give him. So, Bill, tell us how you got your start in horse racing, whether it's in horse racing as a track announcer, whatever, stories from early in your career when you were getting up and running.
Well, my dad, my late dad now, he passed away in April of 2019, used to take me to Arlington Park, the old Sportsman's Park. I'm dating myself a little bit. Hawthorne as well, more thoroughbred than harness, if you will. And so I was always a horse racing fan. After college, I was looking for jobs. I was a broadcast major. I was going for, small TV sports jobs in small markets, came close, didn't get anything going. So I in 1994, I think, or 1994, 96, 94, I think it was. Yeah. I started like my own little horse racing talk show, weekly talk show on suburban Chicagoland station. It was called Inside Chicago Horse Racing. Did it just for 1 year, but what it really did was kind of like prove myself a little bit. I did everything on it. I sold the airtime. I was the host, co-host, all that stuff. And then I was out in Las Vegas. I thought I was going to, start working for the casinos and all that. And lo and behold, I heard about a job at Santa Anita in Hollywood Park, the old Hollywood Park now, because now that's where the SoFi Stadium's at. Yeah. So it was a job called the results position. It was under the Santa Anita publicity department, as well as Hollywood Park. And it's a defunct job now because of technology. Obviously, you can get results anywhere, but it was a free result line. And so I would be the person talking about the results. There'll be stretch calls as well. You get anything that California was having races on, I would have the results on that free results line. And then I'd call up the radio station. So like the all news station in LA, KNX would play stretch calls, and then there'd be a little tagline for me at the end. Also the sports radio stations, anything that kind of needed to be done. If I need to be a guest on a horse racing show, I was the guy that they tapped on the shoulder to do that. And that allowed me to practice a whole lot because my office was at Santa Anita Park in the press box, which is on the rooftop. And so I had this perfect opportunity. Once I got my job down, I'd have little gaps and I could get out there. And, a lot of my race calls weren't that great, but it was just practicing, just being able to get reps. Even if I didn't have enough time to really memorize, it was just kind of seeing the races through binoculars and getting used to the tempo. And so that was a great job. And, Trevor Denman was obviously the announcer at Santa Anita at the time. But Luke Kreitbos was the guy who really helped me out quite a bit. Luke was a great friend of mine. When he passed away, it was a very, very sad day for me. I still remember when I got the news for the first time. Just awful. But Luke was great. And Luke just absolutely loved hearing these. I would just give him the cassette. So he got to listen to all the screw ups and all that. And he would offer, in between laughing a lot, he would give me some pointers and all that. But Luke is the guy, you mentioned Turf Paradise. Luke is the guy that got me my first calls on real microphone. So my first races on real microphone was at Rito, the Tucson, the fair out there. So I got to call like 4 or 5 races. And then every year, the guys from Southern California would go out to Turf Paradise for a weekend, which is our weekends were like Mondays and Tuesdays. And so we go out there for a spring training game. And then we go to Turf Paradise and we call a few races. Well, Luke was the announcer then, and Luke got me the opportunity to call a race at Turf Paradise. So like my 5th or 6th race I ever called on a microphone was at Turf Paradise. And that was certainly a frightening experience because I had my dad watching from Chicago at the OTB, had everybody watching, and somehow I got through the race. I didn't screw it up, and got to do that for like a couple years, call a race at Turf Paradise. So there's a little tie-in right off the bat, but that's really kind of how I at least got going in horse racing.
First follow-up question that's necessary is somebody that worked at the old HRTV. How cool is it to work at Santa Anita? What a great place that was to work.
Yeah, you get to work every day. And, and part of my job towards the end of my run at Santa Anita was working at Clocker's Corner. And I would just be like, here's Silver Charm, here's Free House, stuff like that. And but every morning you come and it's just a spectacular backdrop, the San Gabriel Mountains. And it's so cool because there's so much history there. And it was such a great time to be out there as well. As I mentioned, I was out there for the Silver Charm years, all sorts of great races, and I was there for every bit of it. And just on the, I could go out on the rooftop and watch a Grade 1 race. I mean, that's how cool my job was. So even though it was just an entry level position, if you will, to me I was on cloud 9 because here I was as a racing fan. Here I am working at Santa Anita and Hollywood Park.
Yeah, and Andrew always gives me grief because I had been to Hollywood Park, but I still have never actually stepped foot on the grounds at Santa Anita, and that's something that I need to fix at some point really soon, especially considering I'm a state away. But I think just going back to like how you got your start there with a position that no longer exists, do you think you came along at the right time as that position was starting to kind of die off, but it allowed you to kind of grow a lot earlier in your career in terms of where you could potentially go in horse racing?
Yeah, it kind of gave me, I didn't want to go out and Luke was always like, you want to go do this, I'll get you a job. And I said, I like where I'm at. So, I didn't really want to go out too soon. And so eventually then it became available, Arapahoe Park outside of Denver. And that was my first gig at that racetrack. And, I'm just looking back at who was, who had the position. I think John Lees had the position for a little bit after me, but it wasn't always just, it wasn't always like real broadcast people that had the job. But it was just a perfect job for me. I mean, there's no perfect. I was just like, at the time, I'm like, there's just no one. I don't think there could be anyone more qualified, just because I wanted the job so badly, and I thought I had stuff to offer the publicity department as well. And it just seemed to that was the next step, if you will. I guess parlaying one step on top of another, and then Arapahoe Park, and now we're talking 20 years later, and I'm still could say I'm a professional racetrack announcer, which is kind of cool. At least I think so.
Following up on something you mentioned about Luke Kreitbos, because Pete mentioned Luke a lot last week. He told the story of how Luke got him his first race call and then just out of the blue decided to show up. How instrumental was he in helping guys get their start? Because there are some instances in the business where if you run into somebody and they're not interested in helping you, it can kill your career. This guy helped make the careers of a lot of people who are prominent in the business. And I just think that's so cool.
Yeah. And Luke knew everybody, and Luke sort of knew what was going on in pretty much any and all track announcer positions that were coming available. So he was kind of like the Adam Schefter of track announcers, where he had all the information. And, that's probably the one thing I miss about the guy, even though I've been in the business a lot longer now, and is because he knew everybody. He might not be, occasionally he'd be wrong, but most of the time he'd be right. But Luke was the guy who would tell you if if you thought something was a little corny, because at first I was, I tried to be a little too cute, I think. And he would tell me that stuff, but he was always, he was a big fan of mine. And, it certainly, he's the guy who got me Arapahoe Park. There's no doubt about it. And then I got Beulah Park on my own, but I think he might've even told me about it, thinking back. So, he helped me out in that respect. And then after he passed, he was the announcer, obviously, at Churchill and Ellis Park, and I left Presque Isle Downs to take Luke's position at Ellis Park. And so that was real rough because I was, there, 2.5, 3 weeks later after his passing, because the Ellis Park meet was going on at the time. And so that was a rough situation, rough couple weeks, a few weeks as well, after I started, because, here he is, he was there, and I'm in his office, if you will. And I felt kind of, I've been in the office many times before. I would go visit Luke at Ellis Park all the time, because at Beulah Park, I can, it's like a 5-hour drive from Columbus. So it's nothing too major. And I was, single at the time. I could do whatever the heck I wanted to. So let's go to the racetrack and any and all opportunities. And so that's what I did. And that's a lot of times I go visit Luke. And then so when, Luke was at Hollywood Park, I was out there. Then Luke got to Kentucky, and I was at Beulah Park. So therefore the geographic distance was much closer. And then Luke loves going to racetracks as well. So he used to go to the Old River Downs all the time. And I was the track announcer there for a couple of years. So he'd come up there all the time. And then I was really, really close to Churchill Downs. So, Luke and I, really good friends, a lot of nights out, let's put it that way, with Luke, because Luke certainly knew how to tip a few back, if you will. But there's, Luke, no one says a bad word about Luke. Luke, and that's something in horse racing that is very, very uncommon, because it seems like it's very easy to tick people off. But Luke just had that bubbly personality, just a guy's guy in every respect. And, even to this day, I still miss the guy. I do like to start off most days when I do the first race at the track I'm at. Luke used to go, "There, off and running." So I just go, off and running. Just a small little tribute, if you will. Usually I do it most days. I don't forget too often. But that's just, one thing that I take from Luke. And then when I'm really feeling salty a little bit, I'll put out a good set down for the drive. But I don't do that too often. But that's when I'm thinking of him as well. So sometimes it just comes
special occasions, right?
Yes, exactly. Not all the time. I try to be my own announcer. I really try not to take too much. You listen to various announcers, and some the ones you like, you say, "Oh, that sounds interesting," but you don't ever want to take anything that's like the trademark. You don't want to do Dave Johnson, down the stretch they come, because if you do that, that's corny, and then also Dave doesn't like it when you do that either. So he'll I think he had to protect his because it's trademarked. Yeah, so he had to protect that from a video game or a movie or something like that. Dave doesn't like that. So I would never do that, obviously. Just, come up with your own stuff and, leave the imitations Yeah, unless you're really trying to do an imitation, then that's one thing. But if you're not trying to do an imitation, just don't get too overboard and trying to imitate other announcers.
Now, if you are trying to do an imitation out there, by all means, go as overboard as you want. Hi, Frank. How you doing? That guy's Dwayne Lucas is just outstanding.
Yes, it is.
Outstanding. And he channeled that once at Golden Gate with a 3-horse field. It's somewhere on YouTube somewhere. It's just, if you haven't seen it, cue it up and watch it. It's pretty hilarious.
Yes. Yeah, Frank certainly used that early on in his career to get noticed, and he doesn't do as much now, and but certainly was a good marketing tool, if you will, to have that skill, not a real known skill, but being able to take that and make it, it was all those. What was that one time at Turf Paradise? Did like about 10 or 12 in a row?
Yeah. Yeah,
that was unbelievable. That should go in the Smithsonian of horse racing, because that was from top to bottom just par excellence.
It's like an independent wrestler using the gimmick to gain notoriety. If there were certain developments that hadn't happened, this would go in a Joey Ryan direction. But now we're going to go into a direction of some of the most notable stories you had from the booth. JD, did I scare you? Did I scare you at all there?
I wanted to avoid Joey Ryan as a topic ever on this show, but you bridged there. Actually, before we go in the stories from the booth, I kind of have an Indiana Grand related question first.
Sure.
I mean, I feel like you feel like you've made a home there, because obviously that's been kind of what you've been known for. Now you've been 7, about to start 8 years there. Yeah,
just got done with my 8th year. I started 2013, so. When you add them all up, it's 8, and so it'll be 9 coming up in mid-April, because our commission meeting was a little less noteworthy. So just to prove the racing dates, 120 racing dates next year, a lot of the same schedule, Monday through Thursday, a couple of Saturday cards, more for the holidays for the thoroughbreds, quarter horses on 6 of the 8 Saturdays. There'll be a lot more. We're going to try a lot more, I don't know what you want to call it, fun stuff. Stuff that at least I think we are. I don't know if I want to completely open the bag, because I don't know if I have full approval yet. But
just
I think
volunteer Rachel McLaughlin for everything you can.
Well, usually that's what happens there. Rachel's the one, because Rachel's a lot younger than yours truly, so she can get up on the mechanical bull and make a fool of herself, which she does great. I mean, she does a great job. I remember putting out the video one year with her on the mechanical bull. So she's the one who gets a lot of the lovely assignments, if you will. I got to stay up in the booth, so therefore Rachel. Yes, exactly. So Rachel's the one that gets those fun assignments.
But the signal, I mean, obviously with Rachel and with Nancy, I mean, it's a gem. If you guys aren't following that simulcast signal from Indiana Grand, it is one of the best produced shows that you're going to see in horse racing. And I think, you've obviously seen a lot of changes there as, the casinos come in, and, we've seen purses increase, and just, obviously there's been some track name changes and such as well. But, unlimited growth, it seems like, at Indiana Grand right now for what the future can hold for the track.
Yeah, when I first started, our record handle day was only like 1.8 million, I want to say, for like the Indiana Derby, and now we hit over 6, if I remember correctly, as our record handle. So we're not NYRA, we're not Santa Anita, we're not even Oaklawn or Gulfstream and whatnot, but what we are doing is we're trying, little by little, we've increased our handle. There's only like 1 year, I think, of the 8 that I think our handle went down. It was when we took that first real huge leap from with handle, and we were like stagnant 1 year. But every year we seem to be doing great, and we were to have a little bit more purse money because Indiana has table games, and as well as the sports gambling, which is, even though we don't get money for the purse from the sports gambling, from what I know, the table games were, before the pandemic hit, they were doing like astronomical numbers. So like the Indiana people love their table games. So we were going to have a little bit of a purse increase, and that gets some of the Kentucky trainers, entices them to give their horses some shots at Indiana Grand. And I'm hoping nothing goes too off the wall here in the next few months. That hopefully everything is not shut down, and we'll be able to generate that money for that purse increase. But that we'll see how that goes. That's all speculation at this point. I'm sure we'll be putting out more about what purse levels might be, but kind of have to let things play out, if you will. But I know that's something that's in the works for next year.
I'm just going to co-sign what you two have been saying. Indiana Grand is a really fun place to handicap. Big fields for the most part, especially on Mondays and Tuesdays. So if you're looking for a place to handicap, especially early in the week, look at Indiana Grand, because some of those fields, you get turf races with 12 horses. You get 10 horses on the dirt. You get a lot of possible combinations in those late pick fours. It's a lot of fun, and that's where a lot of those pools come from, because there's a lot of combinations to cover. And if you want meaningful coverage, you're going to have to play a ticket that's not cheap.
Yep, and one of the things that we changed during the 2020 year was move the pick 5 from the first race to the last. It starts with it encompasses the last 5 thoroughbred races. So later in the card, which really the pick 5, I thought was one of the big successes of the year. The other being because of the pandemic, we decided to try something different. We added Mondays and Thursdays. We did some Thursdays in the past, but it seemed like every day of the week was pretty darn strong. And I think next year, Thursdays, we're going to start a little bit later, not like more than a couple hours, but a tiny bit later. I think our GM Eric Hallstrom saw some opportunities later on Thursdays where we were, usually we'll hit the crescendo, then we'll have a quarter horse and it'll go down a little bit. But he was saying we're doing really well late in Thursday's card, so we're going to try something different. That's a good thing with Eric. Eric is certainly able to make the changes that he wants, and we're going to try some stuff. But if it doesn't work, guess what? We'll change it again. And that's one of the things that I like with Eric, even though I certainly do miss my old GM, John Schuster, who was one of the 2 people that helped hire me back in 2013. He passed away on Christmas Day last year. And, that was there was a lot of change this year at Indiana Grand. Not only we had the merger with Eldorado, even though it's still Caesars, we had that all going on around us. We had some new stewards. We had obviously a new change at the top with Eric coming in for John, but it seemed to all work out. Sometimes change, is, even though it's not something that we all want, occasionally it can be a good thing. And I think it certainly has been a good thing, keeping, the train rolling in terms of the Indiana Grand success.
Yeah, and I think mentioned on the Thursday, and why I kind of raised my beer is kind of the happy hour, kind of thirsty Thursday vibe, going a little later on Thursdays. I think that's a great idea. Yeah,
you just got to try and find your sweet spot. See where like I said before, we're not Gulfstream, we're not Santa Anita. We got to find our niche, if you will. And get people interested in our product. And then if it eventually grows and grows and grows, then you can look at some other opportunities. But we're quite happy where we're at right now. And, we have a good thing, with Churchill being a couple hours away. So like I said, with a little bit more purse money, some of the bigger name trainers will potentially give their horse a race at Indiana Grand, obviously they're trying to win, but as long as there's not that huge purse, separation, you can certainly give horses chances at Indiana Grand, and that's what we've seen. The Brad Coxes of the world are certainly here all the time, Tom Amos as well. But we've seen a lot of horses, especially in our maiden races, I think have really improved like the last 2 or 3 years. A little bit with the 2-year-olds, but I'm talking about 3 and up, especially on the turf. Seems like the turf maidens have gone there are a lot more saltier, if you will, than what I saw when I first started in Indiana.
Now, to the credit of my co-host, he actually tried to help the racing office a little bit. Way back, we had Jonathan Wong on the show, and he actually tried to convince Jonathan Wong to run a race at Indiana Grand because, JD knows more about spotting and training horses than a 25% trainer who is currently winning just about everything on the West Coast. Way to go, JD!
I thought he had an Oaks horse that would have fit perfectly for the configuration of the track. Sue me. He ended up shipping that horse to Prairie Meadows, so I was close enough.
Same time zone, right?
No, Iowa Central.
Close enough.
Yeah.
I wasn't sure where the cutoff was, whether it was Indiana or Illinois.
I mean, I've lived in both Iowa and Indiana. That's about the only tie you can probably make there.
They both start with I. They both start with I. They both have racetracks. Don't get me going on this. I need to redeem myself after all of that.
All right. So you started this, Andrew, and I kind of cut you off here. But with Bill,
how dare you?
You've worked in a lot of different. You've worked at a lot of different tracks, and you've worked at, I think, a couple of the more interesting tracks in terms of the announcer's position and figuring out the space that you have and how cramped it may be. Do you have any good stories about kind of the first time going into a booth and thinking, how am I going to possibly call a race from this booth?
Well, I mean, I guess Beulah Park is, the place I spent a long time at. But people sometimes ask, am I from Ohio? Why am I at Beulah Park? Well, one of the reasons why I was at Beulah Park all that time was because Beulah Park ran in the fall, the winter, and the spring. So there's not that many racetracks right now, running. So to be a track announcer, sometimes it's ironic because here I am. I got the winter track. I don't have I got the summer track, but I don't have the winter track. Where back in the day, I have the winter track, and then I would fill in stuff. Like I said, I was at River Downs a couple of years, and I was at Presque Isle Downs, was the first announcer there. Then I was at Ellis, and then I've been at Indiana. But Beulah Park, I used to complain privately to Luke all the time about some of the interesting situations that happened there. And so we call in the wintertime, and back in the day when I first started Beulah Park, they had some big fields. I mean, they would have, on a Monday in January, every race would have over 10 horses. And so, sometimes it snows. And so sometimes I'm calling a race in a blizzard. And let's just say the heat up at Beulah Park is not the best in the world. So you have to kind of bring your own heat with you. So I always had a space heater with me at any and all times at Beulah Park. And then they wouldn't come out. They would go directly to the gate. So these horses would come out of the paddock and they'd be jogging pretty strongly, get to the gate, they load them up and go. So they wouldn't even come out right by the winner's circle. They come out, there was like another path, like a 1/16 of a mile away, almost on the turn. So I would, how track announcers memorize, it's not like, you're dealing with, some world-renowned horse owners where the horse silks just by, Ogden Phipps, black silks, Claiborne, the gold silks. We would sometimes not have all the silks. Let's just put it that way. So here I am trying to memorize a field of 10 to 12 in the snow, and they're coming out over here. I'm trying, got my binoculars. I got snow. I got to lean around to see a certain part of the racetrack. I cut my teeth at Beulah Park. I kind of got myself, somehow, some way, I was able to keep my reputation intact. But that place certainly tested my, I guess, skill. But track announcer, the last thing you want to do is not know the horses when they're going out of the gate. You can fake it a little bit, but when the weather is not that great and you got big fields, the screw up level can be quite large. But somehow, some way, I don't think I screwed up too many at Beulah Park in those conditions. But God bless Beulah Park. It was a lot of fun. Katie and Jenna were very, very nice over the years. They were very nice to yours truly. And my boss, Mike Weiss, who I still talk to this day. Yeah, I think he's doing some stuff for Rito, helping out there. God bless Beulah Park, and a lot of fond memories, because I had a lot of fun during that time of my life, younger years, if you will, in Columbus, Ohio, which is a very underrated city. I will have to say that.
Hail, hail to Michigan! Hail, hail the victors valiant. Had to.
Well,
anyway,
I didn't say I was an Ohio State fan. So
throwing it out there in case there are some people from Columbus, Ohio, who might be.
Yes. All right.
So for those fans that don't follow the Ohio circuit, I think it's the only jurisdiction I can say that I've seen where it seems like a couple times a meet, no matter what Ohio track it is, you will see 3 coupled entries in a race. It seems to be an Ohio thing. Yeah,
the Pyrite stable, they always seem to have multiple horses in races. And, Indiana, we would have that a whole lot as well. My first few years, we'd have coupled entries all the time. But we got rid of it last year, or at the end of the year before. So end of 2019, I think, was when we got rid of entries. And I like it because in horse racing, horse population is limited. And so having you've got 2 entries and you got a 8-horse field. If you had the 2 entries, it's a 6-horse field. It's a crappy betting race. At least with 8, you got something to work with. So at least we got rid of that in Indiana, and I like that as well. But though in the stakes races, Indiana, we have the colored helmet covers that match the saddle cloths. But in the stakes races, they can wear whatever they want. So sometimes it can be a little tricky when they, let's say Mike Lauer has 2 horses or 3 horses in a race, and they all come out with the Mike Lauer green and white silks, and they come out with all white caps. So then I got to go for other stuff, blinkers, the horse's colors, maybe the one's a gray, and that's how you differentiate it. But it makes it a lot more difficult when that happens. And I always appreciate it when they are in the stakes races that somehow, I don't know if it's by luck or if the clerk of scales or the silks person makes sure they come out with different helmet covers, because it is something that is greatly, greatly appreciated by any and all track announcers out there.
No kidding. And from a handicapper's perspective as well, the entries thing, without fail, this happens once a year at this place back here, Saratoga. Once a year, always happens. You get 2 entry mates. One of them is a late scratch. The other runs for purse money only and wins. Those who bet the entry get their money back, but they were right and they don't make money.
Yeah.
If you're right and you bet your opinion, and that opinion is correct to the point where you can make some money off of it, I don't get it. This doesn't seem complicated, and kudos to Indiana Grand for doing that.
Yeah, the only thing I could think of as a counter to that would be like, I don't know, if they have the entry and one's, by far the strongest half of the entry, and I guess they're just trying to protect the bettors. But yeah, when we came up with that rule, and John Schuster, and I've made mention to him over the years, what do we have to do with these couple entries? Get rid of them, and he finally was able to get it done. And Eric came in and he heard about the rule. He's like, good, because that would have been right at the top of my list as well. So, you see it out in Southern California all the time with Baffert. It always seems like the higher priced horse wins
always
a lot of times. So just something as just like any other handicapping angle out there. Know your trainers. And, that's what I would say. Some people, I want coupled entries. Well, I don't know what to tell you. I disagree. And from a track perspective, handle-wise, like I said, you got an 8-horse field with 2 entries. It would have been 2 entries. That's a 6-horse field, and that doesn't do very much for the handicapping product out there. So I say deal with it, learn about what's going on, and you'll become a better handicapper for it, I think.
JD and I share a mutual friend who made his bones around the angle of the other insert trainer here. And it's staggering. You see a trainer who saddles, say, the 3-2 favorite, and they've got the 5-1 third or fourth choice. It's staggering how many times the 5-1 shot is the one that wins.
Yeah. And we see it sometimes Sometimes at Indiana Grand as well. It used to be that, Brad Cox you kind of knew which one he was going to win with, if you will. But there were a few times this year that the higher price horse was able to get the win over the shorter price Cox horse, though it's not as severe as the Baffert angle or anything like that.
Yeah, that's for
we talked about rule changes in Indiana, and obviously the getting rid of coupled entries is one thing, but I would not be a horse player talking to Bill Downs if I didn't talk about off the turf with multi-race exotics and that hopefully going away.
Yes, I think that is something. I know that I've talked with Eric, our GM, on that, and I think he agrees. It'll just be whether or not, as a track, I always tell people on Twitter and all that. We have great management at Indiana Grand. There's only so much that your friendly track, semi-friendly track announcer can do, and I try and make cases for stuff like that, and I think it'll happen, but I can't promise it. So let's just put it that way.
Yeah, we've been hearing positive news towards that, and I know Eric really wants that to happen, but at the end of the day, it's a commission thing and some rules that have to change. So I just had to throw that out because I know if I didn't bring it up, people would be yelling about it after the fact. So
people are still going to yell at you regardless, JD. I hope you understand that. You can't win with
very true.
Well,
very true.
I get yelled at too quite a bit, and when you got Marcus Hirsch and inside the pylons yelling at you throughout the meet, then you gotta sometimes go use the high wire act, if you will, and kind of balance everything out.
So one of the things I wanted to ask you about, because it's a challenge, and obviously it's going to continue, and you're going to have 4 Saturday cards of just quarter horse racing, but you're kind of in a unique position in Indiana Grand. A lot of racetracks in Middle America, they have a quarter horse season and they have a thoroughbred season, but obviously over the course of one card, you have to do both breeds of racing. So can you talk to us a little bit about the preparation for a thoroughbred race and your approach to a call versus when the quarter horses step into the gate?
Well, yeah, I mean, the thoroughbreds, I do the morning line at Indiana Grand as well. So 6 days before the race, I'm getting entry. So I'm actually taking a look at the races for the first time 6 days ahead of time. So I'm always kind of having in the back of my head, I kind of know what the storyline would be. You might not think there's much of a storyline for the 5th race at Indiana Grand, but sometimes there's stuff there that's noteworthy, and you start to just put it in the back of your head. Then as you get closer race day, you're just going over stuff, you're making picks, coming up with best bets. They like to show on the wire to wire show with Rach, that sort of thing. With the quarter horses, it's a little more, I don't know as much breeding wise, even though there are, it seems like all the Escondido Beach horses seem to win all the time in Indiana. So, I've learned that over the last couple of years, but with especially when it's early on, it's difficult. With the 250 race, if you make any sort of mistake, most likely you're not going to win. So with the quarter horses, it's just more action. You don't have much time, obviously. You just start rattling off names. And that's basically what I do with the quarter horses, because they're coming at you, and they're coming at you real fast. And at least if you spit out some names, a lot of times you have the winner at some point. If not, then you just kind of hopefully get it there at least once before the horse hits the finish line. But there's not like a rhythm. It's just more rapid fire where even in a thoroughbred race going 5 furlongs for 2-year-olds, there's still more of a rhythm in calling the races. So I guess it's more rapid fire with the quarter horses. And you just you do the best you can, and like I said, hopefully you call the horse that won at some point during the race. Usually that works out, but and it's a little more difficult with the photo finishes, because my angle, when there's a horse on the rail and there's a horse towards the center of the course and they come to the photo, it's just difficult to judge it. Where with the thoroughbreds, even if it's like this, I can if I'm fairly confident, I can say it. I might hedge it a little bit, but I can probably tell you most of the time. With the turf course is a little different because we have our finish line pole is like the thickest finish line pole in the history of horse racing. So that thing goes up, and that's like right, and I'm just past the wire. So that thing is right there. When the rail is out, oh my goodness. So we got that, and then on top of that, we got there's lights for the dirt photo finish. And so that's sort of in the way as well. So when the rails are out, sometimes it's kind of like I have to it's not very long, but it's like a split second, if you will, that I kind of lose. So I have to really be careful with the turf races and making sure before I go from my binoculars to my eyes, I know every horse that's there. So I'll stay with the binoculars with the turf races, probably closer to the finish than I would with a dirt race, just because I don't have anything in my way with the dirt race.
I can't imagine the freneticness of calling a quarter horse race because you've got horses going 250 yards, whereas even in a 5 furlong 2-year-old race, as you mentioned, you're able to go through the field a couple of times and you're able to tell a story. In a quarter horse race, if everybody breaks clean, it's just get as many as you can, Oh, here's the wire.
Yeah.
Whereas, maybe if a horse stumbles at the break dramatically, that's something you take a split second to focus on, but then they're halfway down the track and you've got to gather yourself again. I have a lot of respect for people that call quarter horse races, especially when you're an announcer and say there's a brain fart at some point, which is going to happen at some point to everybody. But if there's a brain fart in a quarter horse race, when you're 100 yards from the wire, like, wire, that's tough. That is not easy.
Yes. And then the best quarter horse announcer ever, recently retired, Ed Berghardt. The best quarter horse and thoroughbred, the best photo finish analyzer. I don't know how he does it. I've actually called a race. I called one race at Los Alamitos before I went out to Colorado for my first job at Arapahoe Park. I got to call a quarter horse race at Los Alamitos. So I've been up in his booth, and it's pretty good. But Ed is just phenomenal. Just incredible how he never miss. He is truly the best announcer out there that I've ever heard with the photo finishes. A lot of guys are really good at it. So. But Ed was always the best, at least in my humble opinion.
Yeah, I'm fine with just saying Ed was the best and moving on because that's the guy I grew up with, and obviously you're gonna have a spot in your heart with that. But even like the Gallup Racer games and his voice being on there, that I got a special place always for Ed Berghardt. I think we want to go in a different direction now, Andrew. Andrew, there's something that the three of us share in common. And do you want to kind of lead us down this path a little bit?
Hi, Rachel McLaughlin. How you doing? A couple of weeks ago, you filled in on this show when I was off doing something that JD got hysterically wrong, but she filled in, and JD, and Jim Miller from Hawthorne we're talking about something that we enjoy doing that Bill started and Bill takes great pride in. JD, you have the footage from this show. I think Rachel can explain it better than I can. So let's let her do it, shall we?
Yeah, I'll use my last thought, Jim, to say something to Rachel. And that is that I do apologize for all those wrestling GIFs that you end up getting tagged in. I'm not saying that it's going to stop.
You're one of those.
I'm not going to necessarily stop, but I wanted to apologize.
I just realized you are in on that crap. In your original message, you said it, and I completely forgot about it because I was like, "Yay, Jim! Podcast is gonna be so fun." Have you seen this, Jim?
No.
Oh my God, Bill Downs, that boy, he knows what he does on purpose because he knows I manage the social media. He will literally wait until at night when he knows I'm not, on it anymore. And he starts a random out of nowhere. And like, you can go back and look, it's like a wrestling thought. And then it's like, but Racing Rachel wouldn't know it, or some random thing just to tag me in it. And I wake up in the morning and I have 67,000 notifications to go about on WWE wrestling that goes, I know the only sport I know absolutely nothing about, not one iota, goes straight over my head, and I'm literally reading it as gibberish. And these guys like JD and Champagne, think it's hilarious to put gifs of sweaty men in tights on my Twitter feed. That's what they do to torture me, and they think it's hilarious.
All right, JD, just so you know, if it makes you feel any better, all right, I've met the Big Show in an airport before, and my daughter thinks Roman Reigns is the most gorgeous man on the face of the earth. And Rachel's all mad now.
What, are you speaking English? I don't know what you're saying. I don't know who these people are.
I have a 13-year-old son. Come on. Of course.
My
I remember Goldberg. I remember Goldberg. I remember The Rock. I remember the old school ones because I have a little brother, so we used to watch it all the time. But now I know nothing.
Yeah, so Bill likes starting this stuff. He likes tagging Rachel in wrestling GIFs, and he likes tagging a bunch of us for random mischief, hijinks, and shenanigans. JD and I are some of them. I think Pete Aiello and Gino Bacola have both gotten in on this. Bill,
Darren as well.
Yep. What sparked this? How did this start? I'm at a loss for this. It's always hysterical, and knowing how it drives Rachel up a wall is pretty funny. But what was the origin of this?
Well, pretty much anything that gets Rachel uncomfortable is A-okay with me. No matter what it is. I mean, whether it's like I told you before, with her on the mechanical bull and falling on her head. That's funny right there. And one time, by the way, I almost had it recorded too. She was pregnant with her daughter, and she was trying to do something. It may have been when they were dumping water on heads and all that for the charity. I don't know what it was.
The Ice Bucket Challenge, yeah, ALS, yeah.
Okay, I don't know if it was specifically that, but she was doing something, and she was running around, and she fell on her butt while she was pregnant. I was like, oh my goodness gracious. I mean, obviously everything was fine and all that, but that's Rachel for you right there. But anything to get Rachel a little bit uncomfortable, I think that's the thing. And with the GIFs, you can it's just endless. I mean, just type in stuff and you got, usually 15 things to come up with. I think my favorite personal one is anytime I can put the boogeyman in there with the worms or whatever, that will usually just gross her out completely. So, and it extends to the show as well. On the Wire to Wire show, the first segment, it's usually Rachel and myself, and Nancy and Rachel, the second segment. And so my segments can be, if there's not that much going on, I don't have that many best bets. It could be 2-3 minutes, but somehow, we make the show last a little bit longer. And sometimes it goes off on tangents and whatnot. And then, I remember one time I had to go into great detail on how Moxley does his finishing move and how it's changed over the years. And so that she's looking at me like, what am I doing? But, I'm serious enough most of the time. So when I want to get a little goofy or whatever and start talking about silly things, no matter if it's wrestling or something else or whatnot, that will happen.
It's a cycle of credibility, right? You build it up, you build it up, you build it up. Yep. Build it up, build it up, build it up. You just got to know the nosedive.
Yeah, pretty much. So I'm sure it will continue. It seemed like the last time I wasn't really even involved. Rachel would, sometimes thinks that she'll pull something over my eyes, but that doesn't usually happen too often. So I'm usually good for any hijinks, especially on Twitter. And yes, I do know that she runs the IG Racecourse Twitter feed, so therefore you can get her on that, or usually I attack her on her own Twitter feed, just in case the bosses are watching. But they don't seem to have a problem with it. Eric kind of likes it. He kind of trying to figure out what are these two about, or what's their deal. And it took him a while. But he just lets us do our thing, and it seems to work out.
Because we are a fair and balanced show, I have reached out to Rachel McLaughlin right now for comment. And I mentioned that we played that clip, and she said, "I bet he loved it. He loves torturing me. It's his number one joy in life. But I'm supposed to ask you about me and his girlfriend Megan fighting over who has to take him when winter is over."
Yes. So it's kind of like a yearly ritual at the first day of the year, and then the last day of the year. My girlfriend, we're never getting married, but she's been my longtime girlfriend, 12, 13 years. And so whenever it's opening day and Megan says to Rachel, "All right, Rachel, here you go. He's all yours." And then at the end of the year, the same thing, Rachel goes, "All right, Meg, you got him back. Have fun for the next 5 months or so." So it's just a little bit of a handoff there. Between my girlfriend and Rachel and all that. So
since we're talking about Rachel, and by the way, in case anyone's wondering, we do this out of love. Rachel is a friend of the show. I think she's fantastic. I know JD does as well. Bill, whatever. But I need to ask the story of the lipstick allowance, because those who follow Rachel McLaughlin will know she has this ongoing battle with Eric about a lipstick allowance wherein she takes pictures of her expense report, handing them to her boss, and then her boss takes great pleasure in handing them back, basically saying, "You can't possibly be serious." But it winds up creating a pretty fun Twitter interaction with Rachel, her followers, with Eric, with fans of the track. It's a cool thing to do. But that was actually one of the first things I saw earlier this year when Indiana Grand was starting. I'm like, lipstick allowance? What the hell is this? And then these things kept starting to pop up. And then I go, wait a minute. This is actually a pretty fun track to handicap. These people really care about what they do. This is really cool. So that was my introduction to the inner workings of what goes on at Indiana Grand. It's got to be a fun place to work. But I got to ask, what's the deal there?
Well, Rachel's becoming pretty good. She could actually probably, I don't know if she ever wants to be a women's wrestler, but she could certainly be a manager, because she is actually working the crowd quite nicely. You might think it's all serious and all that, but it's all a work, and even Eric gets involved, because Eric made me bring my binoculars in and said, "Oh, here's Bill. He's getting a binoculars allowance," and then Rachel would faint, exasperation and all that. So she's getting pretty good at that, working the crowd and all that. So I'll have to give her credit for that.
Well, we're going to have Rachel back when, JD and I are co-hosting, and having her back, because there's a lot that we could go into. Seriously, though, kidding aside, we have fun, but Indiana Grand is a fun track to handicap. I've got to get there. My only experience in Indiana has been driving through when I drove cross country to move, and when I stopped at the Indianapolis airport, which is the quietest airport I have ever been in my life. The ceilings are about 3,000 feet high. All the sound goes straight up, and I remember sitting next to people who were boarding a flight for Champaign, Illinois. So you have the Delta person on going, "First boarding call for Champaign." I'm like, "What? Oh, you mean the city?" Well, there are like 9 boarding calls for Champaign, Illinois. So every time the boarding attendant goes, "Well, boarding for Champaign." What? Oh, 9 times. But it's a cool place. Yep. I'm looking forward to getting there at some point.
Yeah, the airport's great. Go ahead, JD.
I was going to say, the last time I've been to the track, you would have thought it was named after Bill. I'm not going to go into the naming thing, because that's another thing that irritates certain people. But it was when it was Indiana Downs. Did you get it.
I see what you did there. Ha 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 ha. Right, new material.
Well, I've had a few places over the years that have been, the Downs, if you will. Yeah. I got to fill in at Churchill Downs in 2014. I was at Presque Isle Downs as well, and it was Indiana Downs for a little bit. But they decided to change it for the casino and make it all one big thing, and they wanted to change it, so we had to go with Indiana Grand. And even though a lot of people still call it Indiana Downs every now and then, we do our best to try and politely correct them. But
Time for US.
Yes. Sorry. So there's all sorts of things out there that you'd be surprised that I've had to minorly correct. First year you don't say very much. Second year you start saying, and it becomes the third and the fourth year. It's like, guys, Indiana Grand, get with it.
Now, I've got a follow-up to that really quickly. So
go ahead.
We're out here on the western part of the country. You're on the eastern part of the country. Does this mean that for you tonight is Downs After Dark?
Oh, not bad. Well,
thank you. I appreciate that. CJD, we're getting guests that appreciate my sense of humor. This must be horrible for you. And we haven't even gotten into the Arizona recap, which we're going to get to in a little bit. But we're entering our final thoughts segment. And Bill, as we were talking before we hit the record button, this is a segment where we let our guests have the floor talking about anything they'd like to talk about. It's been a big year at Indiana Grand, a lot of big things on the horizon. You've obviously seen and done so much in your career. The floor is yours at this point. Say whatever you want. This is basically the WWE sending CM Punk out there with no script after John Cena gets put through a table. So go ahead.
I don't know if I'm going to be able to do anything like that, because that's like one of the things that with horse racing, I might have plenty of opinions, but I'm not necessarily going to express those opinions, because you express too many opinions, then all of a sudden the stuff happens and you don't like it. So I don't necessarily do that. I don't know. My father was such a great horse racing fan through the years, and maybe I'll just take this opportunity to thank him for setting me on the path. Back in the 80s or whatever, it wasn't necessarily the coolest thing in the world to take your kid to the track. And my dad would say, "You want to go to the racetrack?" Because he goes plenty himself, and he's the guy that really got me going with the announcing. I used to, back in the 80s was an announcer called Phil Georgieff. I don't know if you guys know who he is.
Spinning out of the turn, yeah.
Spinning out of the turn. He was there for decades, and I used to imitate him all the time. So it's just very, I guess apropos would be the right word, that I became a track announcer. And my dad, he and I were 1 and 1A. We had so many of the same things that we liked. My dad was a Green Bay Packer football fan, pre-Vince Lombardi. He has had season tickets all this time. So one of the things he did a few years ago, so there wouldn't be any red tape, was make sure that those Packer season tickets are in my name. Even though I haven't been able to go to a game this year, every time I go there, I remember my dad. And my dad was very popular at Arlington Park. And when he passed away in April of last year, I was up there in Chicago because that's where I grew up. And I was out, obviously I go out to Arlington Park because, after a parent passes away, sometimes you just want to let off some steam or whatever. And I'm out there and everyone knows my dad and all that. And so after the races, I'm at the local watering hole, and I know John Dooley a little bit, and John shows up and, says, condolences and all that. And he makes mention of calling a race at Arlington. I'm like, holy cow, because I've never called a race at Arlington. I was going to be the fill-in one time for Dooley way back when I was at Beulah Park, but I somehow I didn't get the call in time, and they had to go with somebody else. So for me to call a race at Arlington, even under the circumstances of my father passing away, John made that happen, and everyone at Arlington, it really was a dream come true. As much as I loved calling the races at Churchill Downs in 2014 when Colmus was doing NBC and Churchill Downs at the same time, And that was a surreal moment when I got to call the last 2 races on the Derby Day card that year. Calling a race at Arlington to me was just like, that was so cool. And, obviously everything that's happening with Arlington, I want to get into that. But at least I was able to call a race at Arlington. And, unfortunately the circumstances were bad, but I know my father, who was also he went to the Derby every year. So he got to hear me at Churchill Downs, call those races. He wasn't, they were physically there for me to call that race at Arlington, but I know he was certainly listening, and that was pressure right there. I've never felt as much pressure to get that thing right. And by gosh darn it, I wasn't going to screw it up, and it went off pretty darn well. So I guess that's the tangent I decided to go on. Hopefully it was somewhat interesting, but my dad was such a fan of horse racing, with the Derbies, with the Breeders' Cups, just a racing guy. He owned a couple of horses, but he was just a horse player just like everyone else out there. So he's the guy that got me going. So I figured I'd make mention of him.
I can relate to that every step of the way. I grew up an hour and a half south of this place. And when you grow up an hour and a half south of Saratoga and you have a father that's a racing fan,
oh yeah,
you have no choice. That's
right.
What we're going to be. And I wound up getting a chance to sort of repay him, not this past summer, obviously, but the summer before that. He came out and we came to one of my favorite places, which is the Alameda County Fair in Pleasanton. Beautiful place, nice people. And we wound up actually co-hosting a seminar there along with Dennis Miller and Chris Griffin. It was a lot of fun. And they gave me the mic to start out because I had done one the previous year and a couple of people at least remembered who I was. And I said, okay, show of hands. How many people got into horse racing because a parent or an older relative took them to the track for the first time when they were a kid? There were maybe 50, 60 people back there, and about 40 of them raised their hands. I said, that's why this guy is here. And he wound up giving out the late pick 4. So
nice.
Yeah. So he got to, hold that over my head for a while, and I'm sure I'm not yet done hearing about it. But yeah,
a little quick story. One of the places that I got to fill in one year, I got to call Ferndale one season. I think it was 2000. I want to say it was like in the mid 2000s or whatnot. So I got to call the Ferndale Fair, and those great mules and those tight turns, and a lot of fun those couple of weeks. So there's a little tie-in with the Northern California fair circuit.
You got to call the Humboldt County Marathon, right? With
yes,
like 9,000
3 times around, yeah.
With the marbles in their mouth, spitting them out as they cross the wire.
Yeah. A lot of fun. That turn when they go in that first, there's not a lot of room there. It's amazing how they get around it.
No, I saw a couple years back a horse that went to the outside, and there's not a lot of room if a horse blows the turn and goes to the outside at Ferndale. So it's a very dangerous situation. But the Humboldt Marathon, my favorite race in all of racing, and that's not just my Northern California ties, but just in general. I think that's such a fun race to watch on a track and at a good fair meet. So Andrew, I'm going to kind of take over here. Follow my Twitter, at Horse Tickets. You'll get all the information from Arizona today. Basically, the only thing you really need to know is the commission deadlocked 2-2, so no action on the Monarch Signal returning to ADWs and OTBs and on-track wagering for Turf Paradise. So there will still, at least through the next meeting, the second week of January, there will be no Santa Anita around Christmas, and no Gulfstream and all the permutations thereof. No Melbourne Racing Club. Obviously, I'm the only person who cares about that. But yeah, so that's the update, and I don't want to bring the show any more down with any of those discussions. I will say that the one unique thing for me, going back to Andrew and Bill's topic, it was my mom who actually was the one that brought me to the racetrack, and that was the Fair Circuit in Northern California where I grew up. So, Pleasanton, obviously the home track Stockton, we lived in Stockton, but we would go to Stockton, we'd go to Pleasanton, we'd go to Santa Rosa, we'd basically follow the Fair Circuit, we'd go to the big Fresno Fair, we'd follow along all the actions. So always a cool story, and I always like to give that perspective because it's not always necessarily the dad that's the one that does it. So
yeah, that's for sure. It's one of those things where there are so many different ways to become a fan of this game, even if it's when you tag along once and you're like, oh, this is fun. Wait a minute, there's 50 tracks in the country. This is great. But no, it's a case where I think all of us feel incredibly fortunate and feel a debt to our parents and loved ones for the things that they did that got us into this fantastic game, because above all else, whether we're announcers, whether we're handicappers, we're fans. And if we didn't truly love what we did, we wouldn't be doing it. That's why we started this show back in March, to give people something to get jazzed about when the pandemic was starting. It's 9 months later and we're still here. I'll leave the political commentary to everybody else who seems to have an opinion on that. But regardless, this has been a lot of fun. Bill, thank you so much for stopping by and taking the time to talk about your career, everything that's going on at Indiana Grand. Have some fun with Rachel McLaughlin, which I'm sure she's going to appreciate and will in no way make us pay for it any point in the future. Bill, where can people find you online, on social media? Your Twitter handle's obviously right down there, but anything else that you'd like to publicize right now?
Yeah, that's about it. Bill Downs 1, as you can see on the bottom of the screen. I talk plenty of horse racing. I talk football, I'll talk basketball, I'll talk whatever. I tend to avoid the politics, so you won't get that. So that's always probably a good thing for most people, though I do have opinions, but like I said, I can keep my opinions to myself on a few different topics, and I don't think people are following me for my political leaning, so we leave that alone. So it's a multi. I talk a lot of different sports and a lot of different whatever else that comes to mind. Whether it's a occasional food pick, it seems like I'll act like a millennial in that respect by photography when I'm eating, or my one of my dogs. I'll put that out there as well, but. It's a very lighthearted, for the most part, follow, if you will. So if you want to do that, you can find me. Just look for the bald head in case you can't figure out which one of the Bill Downs is out there that you should follow.
And if you see wrestling GIFs, join in. Rachel loves it.
Yes, loves it.
Open invitation out there to anybody that likes to stir up some mischief. But this will bring an end to this week's edition of Champagne and JD. This was the latest in our series of chats with announcers. If you like what we're doing, hit that subscribe button. Like what we're doing, leave a comment. We look forward to seeing everything. We see everything that comes in on Twitter, on our YouTube channel. It's a lot of fun putting this stuff together on a weekly basis. JD, you have been through a lot today, okay? A lot. I can't buy you a beer to drown your sorrows. I can't turn back the hands of time and give you the time that you wasted, essentially. But what I can do, I can let you close the show with the catchphrase. So for our special guest, Bill Downs, and the host, JD Fox, I'm Andrew Champagne. JD, hit him.
Everybody be safe out there. Stay off the beaches.
Have a good night, everybody.